Hi everyone, my name is Mr. Watson, and in this video I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of the poem Exposure, which was written by Wilfred Owen. This poem is part of AQA's GCSE English Literature Power and Conflict syllabus, and it focuses on the monotonous existence of soldiers in the trenches of World War I, and how nature was just as dangerous as the war. So let's begin by looking at what the term exposure actually means. One definition of exposure means being vulnerable to something because of being in a certain situation or place. So with this in mind, the poem could be referring to the soldiers being exposed to the horrors and dangers of war itself, for example the bullets and the explosions, etc. But another definition of exposure is a serious medical condition that is caused by being outside in extremely cold weather. So this could be relevant to the poem because the soldiers have to sit and wait in the trenches for long periods of time in freezing conditions. So both of these definitions of exposure could be relevant and applicable to this poem. So Wilfred Owen was a prolific war poet. Throughout the First World War, he wrote at least 55 poems. They all had a common theme: the gruesome, horrific reality of war. At the time, it was generally believed that fighting for your country was not only a brave and noble duty, but also that it was in some way a glorious existence. This propaganda was peddled by the government in an attempt to encourage impressionable young men to sign up and join the military. Owen was disgusted by the way the government perpetuated this lie. His poems are often accusatory and contemptuous in tone. His aim was to force readers to understand the brutal truth and hopelessness of war. The poem captures the confusion and hopelessness of the soldiers in the trenches who are waiting for the fighting to continue. The focus on the poem isn't the threat of the enemy, but the threat of nature itself. The iced east winds, the soaking rain, the mad gusts, the falling snow. As time goes on, these horrific conditions begin to take their toll on the soldiers, both physically and mentally. Many quite literally freeze to death. Those who are still alive begin to question the meaning of the war and their place in it. They wonder what the point of it all is, and this, combined with the harsh weather conditions, further weakens any crumb of hope or motivation for the soldiers. They are portrayed as being numb and simply existing, waiting and waiting for either nature or the war to kill them. So some of the key themes that are explored in the poem Exposure are humanity versus nature. So yes, of course, in the poem it's talking about World War I, but really the poem is focusing on the battle between humanity and nature. Those soldiers in those trenches freezing to death and having to deal with the horrendous conditions, which meant that many of them became seriously ill and some even died. The poem also draws attention to how meaningless war is. The soldiers in the poem lose that motivation and lose that belief of what they were fighting for. All those ideas of patriotism and honour have completely disappeared. They become numb to it. They don't see the point of the war. They don't see a reason for it anymore. They're just existing without really knowing if their contribution is going to make any difference at all. And that ties in with another theme that's explored, which is the loss of faith. There's quite a literal loss of faith as well, as many of the soldiers begin to lose faith in God. Because why would God let them suffer? Why would God send these weather conditions which were killing so many of them when they also had to contend with the war? So many of the soldiers believed that God had abandoned them. And a significant part of this is, of course, people turn to religion and their religious beliefs when things are incredibly tough in their lives. They turn to religion for comfort and for direction. But in this particular situation, Owen writes that the soldiers look to God, they look to their religion, but they find no answers. And that tells us a lot about the mental state of these soldiers and how the conditions were effectively stripping them of their humanity and their feelings and their emotions. Okay, that's all for this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please leave a like, I'd really appreciate that. And I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.